Exodus chapter 15. And what we're looking at today is this movement and this change, and as we move away from the actions within a confined area of being oppressed. And that's what Egypt represented. It represented that oppression, it represented that slavery, it represented that control. And we're going to watch as they make that transition to development of their own national identity. And God's going to try and show them that they can shape themselves very much by the Word of God to become that which God had originally designed us to be. We're trying to move back so that we can again have that image of God. Because how did He make us? God said, let us make man. Make him how? In our image. And that's what we're trying to reconcile and to bring back, that connectiveness to the Lord and being part of our Creator, being part of that which has made us, being like Him, being in His likeness and in His image. So we're going to take a look at that as we make these next couple of chapters through. But the thing that happens when you kind of let go one thing and start doing another thing, there's usually some little confusion and some highs and some lows. And we're going to get a chance to see those today. So let's go ahead and start our reading, chapter 15. And let's experience some of these highs, and we're going to see some of these lows as well as we make this transition. Let's take a listen. Exodus 15.
Chapter 15. Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord, and spake, saying,
I will sing unto the Lord, for He hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath He thrown into the sea.
The Lord is my strength and song, and He is become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare Him an habitation, my father's God, and I will exalt Him.
The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is His name.
Pharaoh's chariots and his host hath He cast into the sea. His chosen captains also are drowned in the Red Sea.
The depths have covered them. They sank into the bottom as a stone. Thy right hand, O Lord, is become glorious in power. Thy right hand, O Lord, hath dashed in pieces the enemy.
And in the greatness of thine excellency thou hast overthrown them that rose up against thee. Thou sentest forth thy wrath, which consumed them as stubble.
And with the blast of thy nostrils the waters were gathered together. The flood stood upright as an heap, and the depths were congealed in the heart of the sea.
The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My lust shall be satisfied upon them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them.
Thou didst blow with thy wind, the sea covered them. They sank as lead in the mighty waters. Who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like thee, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders?
Thou stretchest out thy right hand, the earth swallowed them.
Thou in thy mercy hast led forth the people which thou hast redeemed. Thou hast guided them in thy strength unto thy holy habitation.
The people shall hear and be afraid. Sorrow shall take hold on the inhabitants of Palestina.
Then the dukes of Edom shall be amazed. The mighty men of Moab, trembling shall take hold upon them. All the inhabitants of Canaan shall melt away. Fear and dread shall fall upon them. By the greatness of thine arm, they shall be as still as a stone, till thy people pass over. O Lord, till the people pass over, which thou hast purchased.
Thou shalt bring them in, and plant them in the mountain of thine inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which thou hast made for thee to dwell in the sanctuary, O Lord, which thy hands have established.
The Lord shall reign forever and ever.
For the horse of Pharaoh went in with his chariots and with his horsemen into the sea, and the Lord brought again the waters of the sea upon them. But the children of Israel went on dry land in the midst of the sea.
And Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand. And all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. And Miriam answered them,
Sing ye to the Lord. for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea.
So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore the name of it was called Marah. And the people murmured against Moses, saying,
What shall we drink?
And he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord shewed him a tree, which when he had cast into the waters were made sweet. There he made for them a statute and an ordinance. There he proved them, and said,
If thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and wilt do that which is right in his sight, and wilt give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians. For I am the Lord that healeth thee.
And they came to Elim, where were 12 wells of water, and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the waters.
All right, so there we go. We see this movement now. They're kind of out on their own. The enemy that's been chasing them is gone. But the enemy that they were familiar with, they watched the destruction. But now they go, as they move and they go on into other realms, they're going to recognize that trouble exists in many forms, in many shapes. It comes in many ways. Trouble has a variety of ways of presenting itself. You can just be thinking things are going to be wonderful, but then trouble can show up. And so we're going to look at this and see how did they deal with this, and see if we can see and learn how we deal with it as individuals, as followers of the Lord, and can we learn something from that. So we start off by looking at verse 15, and they're on a high now. I mean, they just came through the Red Sea. They just saw the waters separated. They walked on dry land. And they're like, wow, I have never seen anything like this before. And they're going through. And when they get on the other side, they see Pharaoh's army coming. And they're like, oh, well, now they're coming after us. They're trying to use the same method that we use. But it don't work that way. I find it interesting that the God uses coming together and having scripture studies and Bible studies and church services for his people. Coming to my house. I was glad when the Lord, when I came into the house of the Lord. All those different phrases that we remember hearing. But guess who also shows up? When we studied the book of Job, it said that the sons of God presented themselves to the Lord God, but Satan came also. And so here's Israel going through God's path, God's way. They're following God's direction right through the Red Sea. But guess who coming trying to go that same way too? Pharaoh. But Pharaoh did what? He got drowned. Pharaoh's army drowned in the Red Sea. And now they are just ecstatic. And they are just like, wow. Pharaoh tried to do what we did, but Pharaoh don't know who we know. See, a lot of people can do good and godly things, but they don't know God. And that's a difference between that. And that's important to keep in mind, that you need to make sure you know God. They were going through the same path, but they didn't have the same relationship with God. So therefore they're trying to use what God provided, and it's not going to work for them. God provided the separation of the Red Sea for Israel, but the separation of the Red Sea did not work for Pharaoh. That became their actual destruction. So you have to take in consideration, you can't just walk and use godly things without having a godly relationship. So now, with that happening, now look at verse 1 of chapter 15. It says, then sang Moses. Now Moses is singing. He's like, wow. You usually sing when you're feeling what? Feeling kind of good, right? Although there are sometimes too, because what's that? The lady sings the blues. And sometimes when you feel in the blues, you can sing too. But he's singing for joy, and he's like, and Moses sang and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord, and spake, saying unto the Lord, I will sing unto the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horses and the riders have he thrown into the sea. So he's just rejoicing that which brought them fear is gone. The thing that was terrorizing me is gone. I was leaving and making my way out of the bondage of Egypt, but then I saw them coming after me, and now they're gone. And he specifically described it as the horses and the riders. And you look at this, the rider is the person that's coming, but he's riding on all of his strength. So God removed the strength, which is represented by the horse, and the rider, which is the person that has the mind to destroy. And sometimes we look, okay, what can you build to help bring down? Well, what is your strength? Is it just physical strength? Is it higher intelligence? Well, I can outsmart you, and there are certain people that know how to, be clever and sophisticated, and next thing you know, they kind of got you in a bind, and that's their strength. Other people use finance and money. They try to put you in financial situations where they kind of trying to manipulate. Whatever the strength is that person or that rider is riding, when the Lord destroys the rider, he's also removing that strength. And that's an important thing to keep in mind when we try to apply this to ourselves. Look at verse 2. It says, and the Lord is what? My strength. So the rider is riding on his strength, which was the what? The horse and the chariots. But who is my strength? My strength is the Lord. All right. So the Lord is my strength, not the horses, not the chariots. A song, and he shall become my salvation, which is very prophetic. He said, he is become my salvation. Well, who brings salvation to us? The Lord. All right? Which is very prophetic. All right? And then he goes on. He is my God, and I will prepare him an habitation, my father's God. I will exalt him. All right? I will prepare him a habitation. Where does God dwell? In us. So if we're going to prepare God a habitation, what are we preparing? What are we fixing? What are we bringing as a welcome vessel? Ourselves. And that's all the Lord wants. He wants to dwell with us. We were created to be in the presence of God. I was saying, well, why did God make us? He made us so we could be with him. We could fellowship. We could be in his presence. All right? And so, once again, in this song, he's prophetically talking about salvation. He's talking about the habitation. Look at verse 3. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Now, that's something that oftentimes, you don't see people having that on t-shirts. The Lord is a man of war. But God is one that will fight against wrong. He will fight against what is unjust. He will fight against that which is corrupt. He will fight against sin. God, we often talk about us being in a struggle, but the struggle that we're in is not as much natural as it is what? Spiritual. And God tells us that we should put on the whole armor, that we should be ready to do battle, and that we are in a struggle, in a war, and the war is more fought in a spiritual realm than it is in the natural. But we see it manifest in the natural. We see it with stuff that comes up, and we don't really enjoy some of the struggle that we deal with naturally. But even a greater struggle is happening behind the scenes, which the Lord is trying to get us to be aware of. Because if we can be aware of that, we won't put so much weight and so much emotional stress on what's happening in the natural and try to focus more on the spiritual. And if we can do that, we'll find ourselves, number one, a little bit less frustrated and less fearful. because we recognize that it's a spiritual battle, not so much the natural. All right? So that's an important aspect as well. But he goes on, and he says in verse 4, Pharaoh's chariots, once again, those chariots represent his strength, his technology. Pharaoh's chariots and his hosts has he cast into the sea. His chosen captains also drowned in the Red Sea. So the chariots, which we talked about as being, ability to have a power or strength, but he also pointed out his chosen captains. So what's a chosen captain? That represents the people that have sophisticated methods, intelligent ways, wonderful strategies, brilliant ideas. These are the individuals that work their way up to be advisors and captains to Pharaoh. So all these that had these wonderful strategies and things that they've gotten, from the wisdom of man, that failed too. So all your chosen captains, the people that you put up as, well, this guy, he knows what's going on. And that guy, Moses said before, in the verse, what was it, verse 2? He said, the Lord is my strength. Not some intelligent guy, not some person, or you should go check out this guy. This guy knows the Bible left and right, up and down, back and forth. It don't matter how much he knows it. He ain't your strength. The Lord is your strength. And that's who we lean on. We got to make sure that that's what we are going to. And we have to do that personally. A lot of times, and I don't find any problems with joining together and having that. Matter of fact, the Bible tells us that we should do that. That we should come together. That we should dwell amongst each other. That we should fellowship. But we don't do that with the mindset that that's why I'm going to be saved, and that's why I'm going to know the Lord, and that's why. No, you're going to know the Lord by how? Knowing the Lord. You get to know Him. All right, so we don't want to get the cart before the horse. All right, a lot of those things are for us to help develop us, but that don't save us. We're saved by the goodness of God and by His sacrifice. So chariots and chosen men, they're gone. Verse 5. The depths have covered them and sank them to the bottom as a stone. And so when it talks about the depths, there's a whole lot we could point that out, because it speaks to the eternal destination and the eternal abyss that people will find themselves in that fight against God. You're going to the depths. You're not going to be in the presence of God with peace and joy. You're going to be in the depths of destruction, and the depths. And so we start talking about Hades and hell and lakes of fire. All that ties into this phrase, the depths. All right, and that's not where none of us want to be. But God's enemies, that's where they will be. Verse 6. Thy right hand, O Lord, is become glorious in power. Thy right hand, O Lord, has dashed in pieces the enemy. The strength of God. I mean, that's very self-explanatory there. And it uses the word right hand, not so much that God is a man with a hand, although when he presented himself as Jesus, he was a man and is a man. But the aspect is an anthropomorphic type of form of speech that's basically saying that the ability of us to just think and move our right hand, and when God says something, it's like him saying to his right hand, pick this up and move it over there. And so when God says move this, like when God just says we're going to move a mountain, he don't have to reach down and grab it with his hand. The mountain moves by his what? By the word. All right, so just the aspect. So when God came, and it's going to talk about it as we go a little further here, when God wanted the waters to separate, it just happened. Now it's going to give us a description here as to how Moses envisions it, but we'll save that for when we get there. All right. Verse 7. In the greatness of thy excellency. Wow. He's talking about God. The greatness of thy excellency. God is good and great. He's wonderful and marvelous. He's above all that we can say. All right. In the goodness of thy excellency, thou hast overthrown them that rose up against thee. So in God's great goodness, he recognizes that there are certain things that have to be overthrown. There's certain things that have to be cast down. There's certain things that have to be done away with. All right? God knows these things. And so when we struggle and we go and we see corruption and injustice and all that kind of stuff, keep it in mind that it's not going to last forever. It's going to be thrown down. How? Through the goodness of God's greatness, through the goodness of his excellency, because God is too good to allow injustice to reign. God is too good to allow hate and malice and envy and lust to rule the day. It will have its time, but its ultimate end is the depths. It's not going to last. All right. Thou settest forth thy wrath, which consumed them as stubble. See, God's wrath, when God looks and says that doesn't match up with my holiness, then it cannot be part of me. So then if it can't be part of him, then it's either cast away or consumed. See? And that's what you have when you have a situation with fire. You know, if something goes in the fire, it's going to get what? Burned up. And if you don't want it to get burned up, you got to do what? Move it away from the fire. So there are things that sometimes God has to move things away from him so that it's not that thing or that person or that nation is not destroyed, and allow it to work so that it can bring itself to a place where it can have the covering that it needs to dwell in the presence of God. But those that never get that end up being consumed or cast away. All right. Verse 8. And with the blast of thy nostrils, the waters were gathered together. Now, we talked about how Moses is going to give a description of his strength. The flood stood upright and as a heap, and the depths were congealed in the heart of the sea. He's talking about how do you get water to just stand up like that? I mean, how do you get water to just, have that wall and not move? That's not the nature of what we see water do. But God is not confined to that.
Amen.
He can do and maneuver as he wants. Now, you say, well, I think I have an idea how I can get water to be strong as a wall. I got to freeze it. I got to put it in the refrigerator. Well, how are you going to put the whole sea? But it said that God did it with the blast of his nostrils. So it makes you think, you wonder if that wall of water on the left or the right side was ice. And I say, well, it could be, but me personally, I don't think it was. I think it was still water, because they didn't call it ice. They called it water. They didn't call it snow. They called it water. But who knows? I wasn't there, so I just throw that out there. I can't be dogmatic one way or the other. But however it happened, that wall was there, and he describes it by the blast of thy nostrils. That's how that happened. It was stood up like a heap. Verse 9. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake. So the enemy's like, I'm going to use that which God created, and I want to achieve my agenda using the things of God to get my way. That's not going to work. It never works. We see people even today, we call them false prophets and false teachers that try to use godly things. They try to grab God's Bible and they try to say things. Their main objective is to enslave and to corrupt and to grab. And so when you use God's things to get your own way, right, then they're going after money and power and all this stuff, but they're trying to do it, and they're holding God's Bible as a means of, this is how I do it. And you know what's popping in my mind right now, right? Trump standing in front of that church holding the Bible. Lord help us. Yeah, I know, right? Lord help us. But God's going to deal with stuff like that. So you can't use God's designed paths to bring salvation for your own gain and for your own development. So it says, the enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoils. My lust shall be satisfied. You see that? I'm going to use God's path to satisfy what? My lust? It's never going to work. It's always going to be brought down. So you keep your eye on that. One of the things that when you see people do that, you just sit and watch and see the slow or sometimes even the swift, but you sit and watch how God deals with them. And God help the person when his wrath is attached to that individual. So he says, it says, my lust shall be satisfied upon them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them. So he's going to go, I'm going to grab my fighting instrument, and I'm going to fight against the things that I don't like. All right, and I'm going to satisfy my desires and my lust and my wrath. And that's not going to happen. God's going to produce his own wrath. Verse 10. Thou didst blow with thy wind, and the sea covered them. So now, the same breath that parted the sea, that same breath came and what? Closed it up. You covered them. They sank like as lead in the mighty water. All right. So they ended up, in the path that God created, but then that same thing ended up destroying them. Verse 11. Who is like unto thee? Who is like unto God? Nobody. All right. Look at what Moses says next. Look at this. He says, who is like unto thee, O Lord, amongst the gods? Now, I want to pause there for a second. And when it says, who is like unto thee, O Lord, amongst the gods? What is Moses talking about when he says amongst the gods? Well, he's talking about those spiritual entities that empower and work behind the scenes that the natural man and other nations actually worship and give attention to. Once again, pointing back, we're dealing with a spiritual situation, and the more we recognize and are aware of that, I think the more focused we can be, not only in the spiritual but also in the natural. We have to see things as a spiritual. And so Moses, like all these other gods, the gods that the Egyptians were worshiping, they were worshiping the water, they were worshiping the flies, they were worshiping the frogs, and all these things were spiritual entities behind all of these things, that they were able to do things that were somewhat mysterious and somewhat mystical, but they don't equate to the God that we serve, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He is the God. He is the one that created all. And so these fallen angels and all of these demons and different things that can grab your attention for a time and can maybe wow you because they can do things from a spiritual perspective that seem impressive to us in the natural. But they have nothing on God, because God created all of this. Even those that God created that have fallen. Satan was created, but Satan decided to do what? His own thing. It's the same thing that Pharaohs did. So sometimes it's the same thing that we do, but we have to break ourselves of that and say, not my will, but what? Thy will be done.
Thy will.
All right. Who is like thee? Gracious in holiness. All right. Gracious and holiness. Wow. What a combination. He is. See, God is so holy. We tried to make that description that if you're that holy, glorious in holiness. I'm sorry. If you're that holy, you cannot come in the presence of God unless you have the same holiness, which is impossible without God what? Giving it to you. So you need the imputation. You need God to give you what you can't produce yourself. Because if you're not as holy of God, when you come into his presence, you lessen his holiness, which is never going to happen. God is always going to be most holy, the greatest. And so when you come into his presence, you have to have the same what? image. When he made man what? In his image.
Right.
So we got to come to him with that same reflection of holiness. We have to reflect it perfectly. And if we don't reflect it perfectly, we're going to be destroyed. Because we're there without having the proper wedding garment, as Jesus said. Why cometh thou here and not have on your proper wedding garment? So you weren't dressed right. The holiness of God is highly important, and we always have to keep that in mind. And that's what is the struggle that we have now, is that people are trying to come to God with goodness and good works and kindness, and those things are good. They're part of the attributes of God. But you can't just be good, you got to be holy. All right? You know, we talk about holiness, and one of the things that we kind of got twisted, especially in the holiness church movement, they were like, well, holiness means, well, you don't wear your hair a certain way, and women don't wear pants, and you don't wear fingernail polish, and you don't go to the movie show, or so they were trying to define holiness as actions. Holiness is not actions. Holiness is a gift of the nature of God that is given to us. And you get that how? By asking him. He says, if you come unto me, I will in no wise what? Cast you out.
Cast you out.
But you got to ask for it. And then you got to believe that what you ask for, you will receive. So there's so much we could say on the holiness of God, but we're going to move along. So it says he's glorious in his holiness, faithful in praise, doing wonders. 12. Thou stretches out thy hand, the earth swallowed them up. All right, simple as that. So, when it's time for the waters to no longer to be congealed, he just stretched forth his hand and it went forth. And sometimes that's how we get this imagery. Sometimes when you see magicians, you see them, you go to Las Vegas and they have all those magic shows, and sometimes you see them on TV, and they get, before they get ready to do their trick, they start doing stuff with their hands, trying to look for I'm doing something with my, the illusion of the power of my motion. Only God has that. So it's important to keep that in mind, and God don't really have to move his hands. All he has to do is say, like he said in the very beginning, let there be, and there was. All right. Where am I at here? 13. Thou in thy mercy has led forth the people which thou redeemed. See, the redeeming is the key. That's how you can enter into his presence. That thou redeem. Thou hast guided them in thy strength. In their strength? No, in his strength. I guided them. So I'm guiding them through. How are they getting through? Because they're strong? No. Because God is strong. God's going to strengthen them. So you guide them in thy strength unto thy holy habitation. See, so I'm going to bring them to a place where they can dwell, and that dwelling place will be a holy place, and it will be a holy place. So therefore, I can do what? I can dwell with them. I can be there with them, because we're being there in a holy place. All right. Look at 14. Now, keep in mind, this is Moses and the congregation singing this. They're bringing forth this praise. It's a prophetic psalm. All right. So look at 14. I find this interesting. The people shall hear. Oh, so people are going to hear about this. All right. So what does that mean? And be afraid. Oh, so the people in the land where we're about to go to are going to hear what happened to the Egyptians, and they're going to be afraid. And they got this right. This is a prophetic psalm. This is accurate. This is correct. That's exactly what's going to happen. Look what else Moses and the congregation are singing in the song. Sorrow shall take hold on the inhabitants of Philistia. All right. So the people that in the land that we're going to come to, they're going to start feeling sorrowful. They're going to be worried and concerned, which is true. But let's keep going. The dukes of Edom shall be amazed. That's true. It's going to go all the way to Edom. Edom's going to hear about this. The mighty men of Moab. Wow. It's going. Even the folks in Moab are going to hear about this. Trembling shall take hold on them. All the inhabitants of Canaan shall melt away. Wow. Look at what they are singing. You think right now they're ready to go in and do some battle, because they know that the enemy is worried and afraid. All those inhabitants in that land that we're going to go to heard and got the word about what happened to Egypt and this Red Sea, and now they're going to be afraid. Well, they're singing this, and this is true. But when the time comes, guess who's really going to be afraid? Israel. When they should not be. This psalm here shows that they were right in their initial reaction. God is doing this. God's putting fear in the hearts of the enemy to let the enemies know they're coming, and they're coming with this kind of strength. They're not coming with chariots. They're not coming with horsemen. They're not coming with chosen men of valor and smart intelligence. They're coming in the strength of the Lord. All of you, the guys that are dwelling in Canaan, recognize this is what's coming. The power of God is leading them. Now, if you could just hang on to that, if the inhabitants that came out with Moses from Egypt could have just held on to that, but they're not. It's fleeting. You're strong for a moment, but then it's gone. I got all the confidence in the world, but then it's gone. And I'm kind of telling you a little bit about what's coming up. We're going to see that very shortly, as a matter of fact. But it's amazing how sometimes you can have all the power of God in just a moment, and the next thing you know, you're shivering with fear and worry and concern. You know, that's the human person. That's how we are, unfortunately, a lot of times. What we're seeing here with Moses and them is a lot of a reflection about what we see in ourselves. How we just hold God's mighty power. I know God is doing this, and I know God is doing that, and He's going to do this, and the people of God, they are going to triumph, and the enemy's going to be, and they should be. But then when it comes time to actually doing it and experience it, we fall apart. We start focusing and working in worry and fear and conflict and concern and all that, rather than just trusting God. But like I said, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me just stick here with this praise that Moses is saying. Look what else he says. 16. Fear and dread shall fall upon them. By the greatness of thy arm, they shall be as still as a stone, till thy people pass over. O God, till the people pass over. Passover shall thou hast purchased. All right. 17. Thou shalt bring them in and plant them in the mountain of thy inheritance. So they're already saying God's going to bring us in, and He's going to plant us there. Why? Because that's our inheritance. That's where we're going. They've got all the confidence in the world right now. Let's keep going though. In the place, O Lord, which thou hast made for thee to dwell in the sanctuary, O Lord, which thy hands shall establish. We're going to go to a place that's going to become the sanctuary of God. All right? Boy, this is good, right? Let's keep going though. 18. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. All right? God's got this. He's going to reign forever and ever. We ain't got to worry about nothing no more. God's in control. He's got it. All right? But they're saying all this on the heels of a mighty victory. And man, can we have some power and some confidence and some strength when we get victory. We can look and tell the devil he ain't got nothing here, you ain't got this, and you don't got that, because we are just looking and experiencing and rejoicing, as we should. And I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm not saying Moses and them shouldn't do this, but I'm trying to point out, look at how they do, just like how we do, but then watch how that disappears. and goes away. All of a sudden, because of a circumstance that pops up. But yet they inwardly, in their being, and this is what Paul talked about. Paul says, there are things that I know that I should do that I don't do. Things that I know that I shouldn't do that I end up doing. So if I keep doing the things I shouldn't do and never really actually do the things I should do, what's wrong with me? And then he said, I know what's wrong with me. I'm a sinner. And that's the truth. That's the behavior of sinners. That's what sinners do. And all this does is, as we go through this, we're going to see Moses and all this congregation, all these people that came out of Egypt. You know what they are? They're sinners. All right, and so what do we need? We need a salvation. We need a transformation. All right, let's keep going here. 19. For the horses of Pharaoh went in with his chariots and with the horsemen into the sea, and the Lord brought again the water of the sea upon them. But the children of Israel went on dry land in the midst of the sea. And that's he's just giving like a little short synopsis of what happened. Moses got drowned, and we walked on dry land.
Pharaoh.
I'm sorry. Pharaoh got drowned, and we walked on dry land. All right. So Moses walked on dry land. Pharaoh got drowned. Egypt got destroyed. Now, this is great. That's the synopsis of why they're so happy. All right. So in verse 20, we see now Miriam, Moses' sister, is going to pick up, because she's happy and ecstatic too. Look at this. And Miriam, the prophetess. Well, let's stop there for a second. What did the scripture call Miriam? A what?
Prophetess.
A prophetess. So we're going to keep that in mind. We're going to keep in mind that Miriam is a prophetess. We're going to go down a couple of chapters, and we're going to see some actions of the prophetess. Now, does it change her description or her title? No. She's still who God described her as. But we're going to see that just because you have a gift don't mean that you are completely void of the need of God's holiness, of God's greatness, of God's redemption. You still need it, even though you got a gift. And her gift here, her spiritual gift, is the gift of what? A prophecy. And so she's going to prophesy with the song. So look what she says. So Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dance. So now they got their musical instruments and they are dancing. All the women are just dancing. They're just, going through the camp, just rejoicing and dancing and celebrating. All right. And Miriam answered, singing, sing ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider have he thrown into the sea. So we're talking about the horse and the rider. We talked about that, right? The strength and the wisdom thrown into the sea. 22. And Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. All right. So park here for a second. So after Miriam finishes with her song, Moses finishes with his song, they continue to travel. And they're traveling for 3 days. They just came through the Red Sea, and for 3 days now they don't see any what? Any water. Now, so I'm sure they had some water they carried with them. They got the goat's milk and there's different things they can do, but they don't have no water. And you can't go for so far without having water. And so they start to get what? Concerned. Because they're using their own logic and recognizing, wow, we're in trouble if we don't have any water. All right, fine. I don't have any problem against logic. I believe in using logic and common sense. But show me how common and how logical water is to just rise up and separate and create dry land. It's not a natural everyday occurrence that I can explain with common conversation. I have to talk about things that I don't understand or don't know. So therefore, am I walking now in a situation where I don't understand and I don't know, because I'm walking in this same God that did this with this Red Sea is bringing us 3 days without any water. Can I say, well, he must be doing something natural in me, just like he did in the Red Sea, because I'm still going, I'm still moving. It's been 3 days. But what's happened? The natural is starting to overtake the spiritual. The natural man is saying, hey, I haven't had any water. It's the 3rd day. And that natural man starts feeling that thirst. But you're still traveling. You're not dead. You haven't fell out. You haven't passed out. You're still moving. God is still what? Sustaining you. And so it's important to recognize that, once again, that's an aspect of that ability. Will God take from us the natural things that we lean on to help us to lean more on Him? And from time to time that does happen. Right? And so how do you know when it happens? I can't tell you that. It's something that you have to kind of discover and discern for yourself. Alright? So they're going 3 days in the wilderness and they found no water. Look at 23. And when they came to Myra, they could not drink the water of Myra, for it was bitter. Therefore the name was called Myra. So now, they come to this place called Myra, and they see a well or a pool or a lake or a pond of water. They see some water. And when they get to the water, they couldn't drink of it because it was bitter. So now, you add this up. So God is bringing us, He moves us for 3 days, and He brings us to a place, and then when we finally get to a place where there is water, He brings us to a place where the water is undrinkable. Well, that just seems difficult. Well, no, it's not difficult, because what are you leaning on? Are you leaning on your own understanding, or are you trying to transform your thinking to lean on what God can provide, how God can do things supernaturally? Or am I going to continue to lean consistently on the common natural understanding that I have? And listen, our common sense and our common understanding of how things work is needed. That's something that you should utilize on an everyday basis. But when you're walking with God, you have to supersede those natural things with the leaning on the Lord and believing that He can do things that I can't explain. And you say, well, how does that work? Well, I'm just telling you, I can't explain it. I don't know how it works. And you will know it when you experience it. And so, but yet, it's something that you have to learn. And that's what the children of Israel are getting ready to learn. They've already seen the Red Sea. They defeated Pharaoh's army, but not because they had swords or arrows. All right? And so now, they're going to get their thirst quenched, but not because they know where the water is, or know where to dig, or know which way to go where the water is. God's going to make a way. But look at what happens. So verse 24. And the people murmured against Moses. Well, wait a minute. Just a couple of verses back, they were what? Singing. Now they're murmuring. Boy, that's us, isn't it? We can get like that, right? We can be singing one day, man, and crying out, complaining the next. Right? And so why? Because we're sinners. And God's trying to help us to see ourselves. See, what God's trying to get them to see is, let me show you who you really are. You did all that singing and all that praising and everything, but I need to show you how you really are. You're gonna cut Moses to the curb, and you're gonna be like, well, what is this God doing? So you don't have trust in me. You are looking to me for things, but you're not looking to know me. And that's a big difference. And as we go through this Old Testament, we're going to see this pop up a lot. That God wants people to want to know Him, not to follow Him because of what He can give you to satisfy your natural desires. Alright, so people murmured against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? Well, you know, the Lord, Jesus told the woman at the well, was when she was there, and He asked her for water, And Jesus said, well, if you had asked me for water, I would give you water that you would make you never, so that you would never be thirsty again. So that was a water that fed the what? The spirit.
Spirit.
Not water that feeds the natural. And so what the Lord is trying to get them to do, can you tap into some spiritual thinking? Can you tap into some spiritual discernment? But look at 25. It says, and he, that he is Moses, cried unto the Lord. And the Lord showed him a tree, which when he had cast it in the water, the waters where the waters were made sweet. So now, what happened here was when the Lord heard Moses cry, God showed Moses a tree. Take this tree, chop it down, and throw it into the bitter water. Now, when you take that tree and you throw it into the bitter water, it's going to make the water sweet. So it says the waters were made sweet. There he made for them a statute and an ordinance, and he proved them. So he used this as a means of saying, I want to show you something. I'm going to prove something to you. So in the next couple of verses here, we're going to see this statement that he makes to them. But what I want to pull from this is the awareness of our inability to be constant in believing and trusting in God is something that God knows. So he's trying to allow us, okay, I know you guys feel wonderful, you think everything's going to be good, but can you have that same confidence in me when things are not going well, when you're going 3 days without any water? So when you're going a couple of days when things are not going well, is God still good? There's an old saying I used to try to make sure that I keep in my thinking, that God is good even on a bad day. And so when things are going bad, I still have to lean on God. Well, when is God going to answer? I don't have to worry about when God's going to answer. God's got it under control. Am I going to hold on? That's the key. That's the real question. God's going to answer, but will I hold on till he does? That's the murky water. That's the thing I'm unsure of. God's deliverance is always there. Now, the other thing is God's deliverance is going to be brought in his way. Because sometimes we get funny with that because I want God to answer in the way I want him to answer. Now, when it came down to this water, he didn't remove the bitter water. He let the bitter water stay there, but he gave a medicinal remedy. Take this, throw it into the water, and it will fix the water. And sometimes we need that. God give us a medicinal aspect. If you take this will make it better for you. And so that's what God told Moses to do. Take this tree, throw it into the bitter water, and y'all will be able to drink it. Well, who knew the chemical makeup of that? Was it a miracle that God changed it? Or is there some kind of chemistry that God knows beyond us? That when you get nasty water and you take a certain kind of plant and you throw it in there, the nasty water becomes fresh. I don't know of anybody that knows how to do that, because if somebody knew that chemical compound reaction, they'd be making water and selling it to this day. But God knew what to throw in there. All right? And it worked. And so those are things that God knows. And so was that a natural medicinal remedy that God gave for the bitter water? Looks like it could be. But it also could be God just changed it. He just allowed, God could do it whichever way he wants to. But it speaks to, there are some things that are medicinal and actionary. If you do this, you get that God knows about us in our own natural realm. That if you do this, you're going to get that. And if we can learn to listen to God and learn that, well, God said, if I do this, I'm going to get that. That's behavior modification. How can I learn to lean on him in my actions as well as my faith? So I'm believing on him for things that I can't control, but the things I can control, I'm going to follow the actions that God gives me. All right. I think I beat that horse long enough. Let me move on. 26. And so this is what he says. He says, and say, if thou wilt diligently hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, and will do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes. Now, boy, that was a lot, wasn't it? So we're going to give ear, we're going to hear his voice, we're going to do what's right in his sight, we're going to listen and hear all the commandments, we're going to keep all his statutes. So how are we going to do that? The only way you can do that is first you got to do what? You got to get to know him. Because how do you know what his statutes are? How do you know what he's saying? How do you know what his voice is saying to you? You got to get to know God. That's the only way you get. So if you don't get to know God, you don't get to know any of this stuff, and you don't get to operate in this realm, because you don't get to know who God is. So you have to know God to be able to operate in these things. So he says, if you do all this and keep my statutes, and he says, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought unto the Egyptians. For I am the Lord that healeth thee. Wow. And so you see that aspect of, God giving a medicinal answer to the bitter water. And now he's saying, I am the God that healeth thee. I have the remedy. I have the medicine. I have what you need. I have the ability to make well what is sick. I have the ability to develop what is unclear. All right. Look at 27, our last one. And they came to Elam, where there were, and look at this, 12 wells of water, and 60. 10, and 10 more is 70. Palm trees, and they encamped there by the waters. Now look at where God was bringing them. He was bringing them to Elam. But while they were in Marah and they saw that bit of water, they flipped out. We already didn't have three days of water. Then I see water, so your anticipation goes, and then when you go to check the water, oh, it's nasty water. Now I'm really frustrated. Now I'm upset because I done got my expectations. But our expectations should always be not in what we see, but in who we know. We walk by faith, not by what? Not by sight. So when you start walking by sight, you're going to get disappointed. Because you're going to see things going, oh, I want this. We're going to get that. No. Keep your eyes on the Lord. Lord, I see the water, but I'm trusting you for my substance. Lord, I see the water, but you're the provider and the one that quenches my thirst. All right. But as you know, this is a very familiar story. This is just the beginning of the murmuring and the complaining. We're going to really get a chance to see how Israel is. But here's what I want you to keep in mind. It ain't just Israel we're going to show and flash the mirror to so they can see themselves. The mirror is also going to reflect you and me. We're going to see ourselves in this. And we're going to be able to identify. And this will help us to do what Paul said. To not be confined to conform to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind. We do need that daily aspect of trusting God and not leaning on our own understanding. All right. So now they're we're going to leave Israel here. They're in Elam, and they got water, and they got shade. They are doing good. And so we're going to see how they do now that they're encamped here. So we're going to stop here, and we'll pick up again on next week, the Lord willing. Any other comments or questions about they're moving from Egypt and through the Red Sea, and now they are encamped in Elam? Anything that anybody pick up on they want to share?